Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have Ryan McCarty. And our title today is How to Build a Culture of Good. And Ryan is an internationally renowned speaker. He's also an author of the groundbreaking book, Build a Culture of Good. And he actually advises organizations on how to create an inspiring, meaningful, and engaging workplace and world. So, welcome, Ryan. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Chantel. I really appreciate it.
So we want to give people really practical advice. So I want to talk a little bit about some organizations that you've actually helped. Try to be as specific as possible on how to build a culture of good.
Yeah, absolutely. So 7 years ago, I launched Culture of Good at TCC, the Cellular Connection. They're the world's largest Verizon retailer. And so currently they have 1,200 stores in 42 states. At the time that we launched Culture of Good, it was a smaller company. They had around 500 stores. So they've grown as the Culture of Good has grown. And so we've developed a movement really and started and launched something that was not only inspiring to their employees and to the customers, but it really had a profound impact on the community around them. And so as the company grew, the culture within their business continued to grow so that the people strategy and the employee experience and the customer experience all collectively, rather than seeing those as very siloed efforts, they continue to grow within the business. I think about another company, Ingram Micro. They're a pretty large company, but they have small stores and distribution centers across the country and really across the world. And so how we were answering a question, how do you give employees a sense of why they do what they do and not just a paycheck on Friday, right? So it really spoke to connecting employees with a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning in their everyday work. Another example would be Redux. It was a startup company a couple years ago. They have right around 12 to 15 employees. So we've scaled the Culture of Good and built a culture of good within companies that have 12, 15 employees to 3,000 employees. And so those are a few examples, but in each one of those.
So what do they do though? Give us, let's start with TCC, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what does TCC do to give a culture of good? What do they exactly do?
Yeah, so immediately what we had to find is a cause that every employee across 42 states could simply get involved with and start to give back, not only to their community, but also to one another. So the Culture of Good is really based on 5 promises. We're going to care about people in the world around us. We're going to drive business to greater success so that we can do more good. We're going to connect with people around us. We're going to inspire others to do good with us. And then lastly, we're going to be authentic with our words and actions. So it's based on those 5 promises that as a company, we make to one another, we make to the customer, and we also make to the community. TCC specifically, as we launched Culture of Good, my past life, I was a full-time pastor for almost 20 years. And so essentially what I decided to do, I had never been in corporate America at all. And so what I did is I just took what I knew about full-time ministry and doing good and impacting the world and people wanting that sense of meaning and purpose and brought it into business without the religion, right? And so like it was really more about living out our sense of connection to the world through generosity and giving back. And so we immediately launched a huge backpack giveaway before it was trendy and cool to do backpacks. This was, over a decade ago that we started this work. But within TCC, we scaled that within the business. And the first day, you can imagine over 2,000 employees giving away 60,000 backpacks with school supplies on the same day. But it was more than just a giveaway. A lot of companies write checks and they give it to charities. And what we decided to do early on is let's not write checks just to charities. Let's give the resources to the employees so that they can give back to their local communities. And so we launched with a backpack giveaway, and that was crucial because at the very onset of beginning this movement, the employees connected with a sense of purpose right away. Obviously, we couldn't just do one day a year. There's a big give back. It had to be part of the everyday culture and embedded in the DNA of the business. And so we began to have a real strategic approach to how giving back was going to look within the business, as well as internally, how we were going to live up to those 5 promises peer to peer and to the customer as well. And so we took a quarterly approach that was a 3-tiered approach that we called Big Good, Our Good, My Good. And the Big Good was the enterprise level. It was the backpack giveaway. It was a teacher give back. It was real simple and scalable. The Our Good was where stores or teams could go into their local communities. They had a little more autonomy and they choose where they wanted to give back, but that was really essential to those stores having team camaraderie. They could select what they were most passionate about, and it wasn't as prescriptive. And then lastly, we started the My Good, which was the individual contribution to where they were passionate. You know, when we sit down and we talk to employees and we talk more than just numbers, and we actually ask them, like, what are you passionate about? What we're essentially saying is we're giving you permission. When you work for us, we're giving you permission to care, to bring your soul to work every day. And so we took that Big Good, Our Good, My Good approach, and we did that on a quarterly basis. And so it was very predictable. And it was a sustainable movement rather than just like a shot in the arm of, hey, we're all going to go out and do this good, or hey, we're going to add this program in for employee engagement. No, this was going to be not just what we did as a company, but it was going to be who we are, how we're going to live in this world as a good citizen. And so that's really essentially why and how we started Culture of Good at TCC. That's the long story.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I know. So you had where you had like school supplies, you said school supplies to teachers in the local communities.
Yeah.
Then you did like care packages for kids in need, and then like a backpack giveaway, and then like veteran events. So those are like, you had 4 quarterly initiatives throughout the year focused on helping different groups. So one was like teachers, one was for kids, and then another one, I guess, for schools, and then
absolutely
one for veterans. So those were the 4 things they picked. Now they don't really say, you know, they just say a portion of the sales goes back to the community. One of the things that we did, I will talk to you about it. So I used to be a pastor too of a church.
All right, good. That's awesome.
And I was a children's pastor for 2 years, and I was a youth pastor for 2 years. And then I got into real estate. And one of our things that we did, we said, every time you buy or sell a house with us, we'll give $1,000 to the local church of your choice.
Sure.
And so we did that for a little while. And then we changed it because it got to be so much management, because it was like, we said the local church or charity of your choice. And then for us, we wanted to make sure that the church or charity for us, our organization, was all about how to bring people closer to God. So we would help a homeless charity, we would help a church, but it had to be, so like if it was for an animal shelter, you know, sometimes people would pick that and we would say, that's just not our mission. Like our mission is to help people who are in need. That was kind of our biggest thing.
Yeah.
And that would not only helping people who are in need, but also helping people in the name of Christ. And so that was really important to us. And so that just got to be too hard. So then we changed it to where we said, okay, we've already picked the 10 organizations. So we called it the 10 for 10 plan, where we say every time you buy or sell, we're going to give 10% of the profits of the sale of that home to one of these charities. And so we've already pre-picked it. We've pre-picked the charity. Now you can actually pick at closing which of these charities is more, that rings closer to home for you. That's how we kind of tweaked it. So can you talk about, because, you want to do good, but you don't want it to be so much of a nightmare, the process of giving it, if that makes sense. And that's why that's why when we had the $1,000 to the church or charity of your choice, that ended up becoming a bottleneck to our business, because it was like someone had to research the organization. Was it really was it a real nonprofit? Was the money going to a good place? So talk a little bit about kind of some systems or questions people can ask. Let's say that here's a new business listening and they're saying, okay, you've convinced me. I want to start something. Where do I begin and how do I make it the easiest as possible where it's not a nightmare?
Yeah, to me, the big good, our good, my good is the easiest. What you're referring to now, TCC does have a foundation, and that foundation allows for employees to find a charity in their local community, but they have designated people, one person in particular, that works full time on this. So, to be able to help with that bottleneck, you really have to have someone that's just completely focused on that all the time. The easy way to approach doing good, the big good, our good, my good was done with me working bivocational. So I was pastor and I had one foot in ministry full time and I had one foot in the business. So when we launched Culture Good for the first 2 years, I was working part time. So I was leading that work of doing the big good, our good, my good. Because it's very prescriptive in terms of an allowance for the big good being this is something that aligns with where we're located as a business, our neighbors, where we see the greatest need. This is what's going to spark passion within our employees. This is where they're collectively going to care. That was the big good. That's a little more difficult. The care packages, we streamline that process. I found a company out of Oklahoma City called Blue Source that we sourced the backpacks through, and we were able to get the supplies already stuffed in the backpacks. Everything showed up at the stores. All the employees had to do was do the good. So we really created an easy way of doing that. So
with the big good for let's use TCC for an example, right?
Sure.
So what is their big good? Which one is their big good that they do?
So the big good looks a little bit different every single quarter. It's some of the aspects of what you said. It's either the backpacks, it's the teachers, it's the veterans. Sometimes they change up a quarter depending on the year. One year they tried to do kind of the animal thing. It really mattered to me. This was after TCC was no longer who I was working for. Culture of Good as its own entity. Now TCC is our client. They decided to do some different and change things up after I was no longer working there full time. So they'll do those major events where they can pull it off at the stores across 42 states, right?
Okay.
So the backpack is the prime example of that. Over the last 7 years, this coming school year, they're going to give away their 1 millionth backpack with school supplies, which is really cool.
So so the big good would be the 4 quarterly initiatives that they do throughout the year.
Absolutely. That collective and listen, all over 3,000 employees do that good either on the same day of the year or on the same week. So if you're a listener and you're talking to someone that has a decentralized culture, this brings everyone collectively together doing that good.
Give an example. When you say big good, mm-hmm. What is your definition of that so people can understand it? It's something that the big good helps everything in the community, or what does that mean?
The big good only speaks to the context of who within your company is collectively doing good at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So it's all that collective enterprise level, every single employee, every executive, everyone is going to be involved in this. The CEO, the owner, on the same day or the same week, everyone's collectively going to be doing good. They're sharing it on social media. They're sharing it with each other internally. It's really creates that movement and that sense of we're a part of something bigger than ourselves.
I like that. So that means you do so, and you suggest doing it 4 times a year?
Yeah, absolutely. And really every company, the instance is going to look different. And so you really have to decide what you're going after. Are you looking to just kind of tack good onto the side of your company, kind of staple it on the side? Or are you looking at really embedding this and making it defining to who you are as a business? Like, is this something that you're like, okay, this is what we do as a business, and oh, by the way, we do some good on the side and it's on our website? Or is this how you want to grow your business? We decided, Scott Moorhead, the CEO of TCC, and I decided that we were going to grow his business and scale his business through doing good. And that was a strategic move that he and I made about 7 years ago. And we've seen his business grow from something to 400 million a year to 2 billion a year company. So that's where he's at now. And it continues to grow. Obviously now with everything that we're facing with the recession and quarantine and his stores and curbside service, that's looking a little bit different as far as his growth and income. But that's how we've scaled the business up to this point, is through the culture of good and giving back. And the first layer of that was doing that big enterprise level good in local communities across the country.
Okay, so then the our good, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our good again speaks to a smaller segment of the business. And so this could be a department within, it could be a store, maybe a retail location, or it could be a distribution center. All of that group of that department or that team has more autonomy to choose how they want to give back in their local community. This was also something that we gave an allowance to on a quarterly basis. And so we always did the big good, but we also wanted there to be a level of autonomy within the stores, because a store in, let's say, Berwick, Pennsylvania, and a store in Atlanta, Georgia, they're going to have a different level of, hey, we see a need within our local community and we want to give back in a specific way that makes sense to where we're located, to our neighbors. And so we gave, it wasn't a huge investment, but it is when you consider the scale of how many employees and stores there are. We gave each store and each department about $500 a year, and they divided that up and used that resource for whatever they needed in terms of supplies and goods to be able to go into their local community and buy that stuff and to give back in a way that was specific to what that store decided they were passionate about doing for their neighbors. And so the our good was a smaller segment within the business, doing good on a quarterly basis. Not only were we doing the big good, we were doing the our good as well. And that led us to then launch My Good, which is that individual full autonomy, as long as, it's a little bit different than what you described, because, the TCC the focus wasn't let's point people toward God. It was just let's do good. Right. And so it was very much driven around wherever you're passionate as an employee, we want you to feel connected to, because I work for this business, I have this resource and these amount of hours per quarter to give back and to do good. And that could be anywhere from 4 to 8 hours a quarter that they were allotted PTO time. So they were paid on as if they were on the clock to go out and do good in their local community. So you might have someone, Chantel, that was like, you know what? I love the backpacks. It was inspiring. I love going out with my team and I love doing this good in the local community. But I am really passionate about animals, or I am really passionate about veterans myself. And I want to really press into that. We wanted, in the same way that you would find your own sense of calling and purpose, we wanted to give each employee the opportunity to do that. So I'll add this real quick, that we started with a My Good and it didn't take off as well as we thought. And I'm finding a lot of companies are trying to give their employees opportunity and PTO time to give back, and they sign up, they just don't show up many times. When we reversed it and started with a big good, that collective enterprise level in the our good, then it just became part of like, this is just who we are. If you're going to work for this company, you're going to give back. And then the My Good just shot through the roof. The involvement, volunteerism was over the top after that.
That's great. And then, so how about, did they also, with the My Good, did they also give them money to be able to do anything with that? Or how did that work? So let's say someone
Yeah.
said, I'm passionate about doing this with the homeless.
Hmm.
Were they able to get like a community grant or
Yeah.
something like that to be able to do whatever
Yeah.
they wanted to?
Yeah, early on, we just started with, hey, here's some hours to give back and to do good. And then as a foundation started, TCC Gives, the company decided to give 2% plus of their profit back to the community through their employees. And so if you got an employee like you're stating that said, hey, I'm working with this homeless shelter in my local community, they had grants allotted up to $10,000 per grant. So you have an employee that is able to get involved in a local charity to give back and through an approval process. And that approval process is the kind of the difficulty where it can get bottlenecked if you don't have a real good system in place for that. As I said, the foundation really works as a committee that works collectively. All the employees, they have to sponsor that local charity, so it has to come through an employee. Anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 per charity is given as employees submit their requests for a charity that they're actively involved in. So they can't just say, hey, I'd like to give $10,000 to the Red Cross in my local community. We would ask then, how are you involved and how are you volunteering and you're giving back? We want to make sure it's not just, we're just giving checks out to charities. We want the employees to be actively involved in that work. And so, yeah, absolutely what you said. It's grants given to local community charities through the employees.
Can you give any examples of things that you did to like make the processes easier? So for us, I know one of the things we did is obviously because we were giving so much money away, we ended up creating a 501(c)
Yep.
called CR Cares so that all the money could run through that. That's
Mm-hmm.
number one. Number two, we had an online process where it was like, if you want to apply, this is how it goes. And then it went to a board of people
Yeah.
where they would then decide and they would meet once a month whether this was approved or not. Any tips that you can give people, like some good processes that you've seen to make this easier? Because like you said, this could end up becoming a real headache if you don't have the processes in place to make it easier to go through.
Yeah, I think, I think those two steps that you referred to, the 501(c)(3) was really important. So that was called TCC Gives. And then as that continued to grow, we realized, we had all these requests coming in. So there is a online portal. I'm not sure what platform that they use for that. But to be honest with you, the things that I hear TCC gives from the foundation, I actually just graduated from my tenure on the board. But I'm hearing the same thing. There's no easy process to, especially when you have 3,000 employees out there and you have potentially hundreds of requests that come in. You really have to find one or two people that are designated to really go through and filter a lot of that out before it gets to the charity itself. As I said, TCC Gives as a foundation has a full-time person that's what they do. So they go through all the process of filtering through all of these requests, and it's just hard work, but it's valuable and good work. So I don't have any tricks of the trade in terms of how to make that process any easier. We're looking at some different platforms, but at the end of the day, somebody is going to have to approve that. There is an app and a platform that I'm looking at right now that does some pre-approval stuff. It's almost like an eHarmony, kind of like connecting the employees to local charity, what's a good fit, but there's some pre-qualification within that system so that once something is submitted, no one has to go through and filter it and make sure that it's something that's approved. Now, how that money is distributed, that's the next step of it, right? So you only have a certain allotment of money, and you have to turn some people down and say resubmit next quarter. But that's something that grants are awarded on a quarterly basis through TCC Gives, and so that comes down to that committee or that board, as you stated. But unfortunately, I don't have any. Hey, this makes it a whole lot easier.
Okay.
In terms of a process, it's the foundation itself isn't something that I've been actively involved in terms of the process, but I do know that employees submit through a platform. The full-time employee goes through, ensures that everything's filtered through, and then the committee sits down once a month, as you said.
Go through it.
That's how everybody's doing it.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question. And that is that let's say that somebody, we had talked about this when you first kind of got on before we hit record,
Yeah.
but you said a lot of times people kind of have a great mission to start with. And then as they grow, they forget about that mission because they get so busy. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah.
Give us some examples.
Yeah. So I say it this way: the greatest risk that a growing organization has is that they lose what makes them special when they first started. I do believe this. I believe that all of us as leaders, when we start a business, when it starts to grow, obviously the first rule of business is to stay in business, because if you don't stay in business, there are no other rules. But the second part of that first rule is not just to stay in business, but know why you started in the first place. We challenge companies to look back as to why they started. And so many companies, when they look back at, if it's even third generation, they can look back on the grandfather and say, he had a heart for this, or, they started giving back early on in this area. It was meaningful, it was purposeful. But as the company grows, you start to look at quarterly earnings, or you look at, it becomes so profitable and profit focused that we forget that profit can be also a great catalyst for good in the world. And that's really the predicament that Scott found himself in. He was third generation in the business. His grandfather and grandmother had started an electric company. His dad took it over. They gave away tons of money to people and local charities, but no one knew of the good that was going on. And Scott realized that the company was growing exponentially. And with that growth, you lose some things, right? You lose that family feel. When we talk about culture, Chantel, we're talking about this sense of something, this feeling. You walk into a business and there's a feeling of the culture of that business. There's a connectivity of how employees treat each other, how the leaders say that you transact with the customer. Over time, as that continues to grow, the message gets watered down, the culture gets watered down. It maybe become decentralized, and people aren't interacting with each other as much as they used to. They're not stopping to connect with one another. We talk about rehumanizing the business and giving people an opportunity and employees an opportunity to get to know each other and to do good together and to give back to one another. And those are elements that are essential that we find in smaller businesses, smaller companies. We hear there was a family feel, but then we started to grow and everybody was untouchable and everybody, our leaders aren't there for us anymore. And really the challenge is that very thing, that as your business grows, put things into place like the big good, our good, my good, like that connectivity. How are we connecting to one another? How are we rehumanizing the business? How are we talking about more in our huddles and meetings than just KPIs and numbers? How are we really sitting down with our employees and showing them that we care about them and giving them permission to care as well? And checking in with our employees from time to time and ensuring that we're not leading our company from behind a desk. Our vision and values aren't just things that we plaster on a wall and they become wallpaper. Like, how are we really living those out? How do we embody those? I like to say that as leaders, our people won't embrace what we don't first embody. And we have to embody our values. our mission, our vision. It can't just be something that we say, come do business with us, come work for us because, this is our mission statement. No, like your mission statement is what people know about you. It's how they see you live as a business within your local community. That tells more than just something that's put on a wall. Your values are really what you're already living out, not something that you aspire to be one day. And so it's really important to really put those things into place so that over time your employees know this is why I'm showing up to work every day. I'm part of something bigger than myself. This is a culture, and everyone's collectively, there's a common shared language around the culture. That's our 5 promises that I shared earlier. There should be language around it. People should be saying the same thing, having an understanding that this is what makes us special. So I always ask leaders and business owners, what's the most compelling reason you can give me to come work for you? And what's the most compelling reason to come do business with you? And that reason is tied into what you do as a business, but it's also tied into why you do that work in the first place. And so tying the what you do in terms of, with what you do with real estate, and then really tying that into a sense of purpose more and more, is I believe one of the greatest callings of leadership within business itself is making the connection for those that we lead between what they do every day and why they do it.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me at ryanmccarty.com. You can reach out to me on that as well, or on LinkedIn or Twitter. On Twitter, I'm Ryan McCarty. I got late in the game on LinkedIn, so I'm McCarty Ryan on LinkedIn. So Twitter, LinkedIn, or ryanmccarty.com is a good place to start.
Awesome. Well, you guys stay tuned. We have another episode coming up in just a minute.